Good morning and welcome to the Basin Energy Investor webinar. My name is Chloe Hayes, the Investor and Media Relations Manager, and today I'm joined by Managing Director Pete Morehouse. Today, Pete will present the investor presentation that was lodged with the ASX today, which will then be followed with a Q&A session. To ask a question throughout today's presentation, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And Pete, I'll hand over to you now.
Perfect. Thanks, Chloe, and good morning, everybody. Before we get started, I'd just like to express my thanks to everybody to date who has helped build Basin Energy together. It's a pretty exciting day for us all here, as you'll appreciate. Our listing day due to go live at 12 o'clock today. We will be going through the presentation shortly, but beforehand, we'd just like to thank our shareholders, our existing shareholders who are coming in today, and we look forward to building the company together. Before we start, I'd like to provide an introduction to myself. So, my background is a geologist. I've been working in uranium for some 15 years. I started my career with Westmoreland uranium deposit in northwest Queensland, before heading over to West Australia, working on concrete-hosted opportunities, and most recently was working as exploration manager for Alligator Energy. I joined Basin Energy a couple of months ago, but the company was founded about 18 months ago with the pure strategy of identifying high-grade uranium opportunities. The group ultimately identified 3 prospects or projects in the Applebaskar Basin in Canada, and we've acquired interest in those, which we'll be talking to you about today. So I'll do a share screen and we will take it from there. Okay, so why invest in Basin Energy? This slide here in front of you can be summarized into 3 main points, in my opinion. It boils down to the key reasons are the projects involved, so that goes for jurisdictions, the assets, and that's having the right geology, the right rock types, and in the right location. We are operating in the Applebaskar Basin, which is in northern Saskatchewan, a continued high-ranking position of the Fraser Institute for mining attractive investment, and also a continuous developer, exporter of uranium. So the Applebaskar has been producing uranium for some 65 years now. 45 of those years have been in the top 3 of global uranium production. Our projects are all nearby to existing mines or uranium deposits, and also adjacent to recent exploration success. So the projects is a key element. Secondly is the people. So we built together a board of experienced uranium experts, both from a corporate and a technical point of view, who are also our joint venture partners who are acting as operator. So our projects are acquired through a group called Canalaska, and Canalaska will be our operator for the next 2 years. This group has had recent exploration success, has got a very active team focused in Saskatchewan, and also has joint venture agreements with Denison Mines and Cameco, so a proven operator in the basin. And finally, commodity. So we are a uranium pure play company. We believe that right now is the time to be exploring for these assets. We believe that we have a bright future ahead of us. And we think that the stars are aligning globally for uranium, the uranium markets, in particular North American uranium exploration. I'll give you a little bit of a flavour to the Applebaskar Basin, because some of you will not be familiar with this, some of the opportunities here. But the Applebaskar hosts some of the largest and highest grade opportunities in the world. So we have the likes of Cigar Lake, some 350 million pounds, almost 16% uranium. And McArthur River, 675 million pounds, and almost 17% uranium. But I think significantly, and something that perhaps our Australian investors are less familiar with, is the recent exploration success. So take, for example, the last 12 to 15 years, uranium in a relative downturn with a low spot price. We still had success. The most notable one there is Next Gen Energy, Arrow. So Arrow was discovered when the spot price was $30 per pound. It created value for shareholders almost overnight. So overnight, the share price doubled, went from around 25 cents up, and then within a couple of years, we were sitting at $4. So even in a uranium downturn, these deposits, when found, create value for shareholders. And more recently, ISO Energy have just recently put a maiden resource on their Hurricane opportunity, 50 million pounds at 35% uranium. So phenomenal grades if you compare that to grades that we see in Australia. such as the Range Uranium Mine recently closed, was running at about 0.3%. Jabiluka sitting at 0.4, 0.5%. As I mentioned, started my career at Westmoreland, sitting at just shy of 0.1%. So whilst grade isn't everything, it's considerable different grade scale of the opportunities in this part of the world. And then very recently, and particularly important for Basin, is exploration success by 92 Energy, who've done some fantastic work on the eastern side of the basin, along with Baseload, who have had exploration success at the GMZ zone, and some putting out some pretty impressive results there. So we're excited to build on the spotlight which is being provided for that area. So Basin holds 3 projects, or interest in 3 projects. We've got a cross section shown on the right hand side of the screen there. Our projects are located in 2 different target areas. Our Gaiku project is located relatively shallow, so just underneath glacial cover, perspective from around 15 meters depth, located just on the eastern fringes of the Basin margin. Whereas our North Millennium and Marshall projects are traditional styles of the Cigar Lake Millennium style, a little bit deeper, traditional conformity style deposit targets. Where do we look on geographically? So we are located on the eastern side of the basin. Our North Millennium and Marshall projects are about 7 kilometres from the Cameco Millennium deposit. So Millennium is just over £100 million, sitting at 4% uranium. And our Gaiku project is on the eastern side, adjacent to, as I just mentioned, the work being done at GMZ zone and APO. So for those of you not aware, recent success in that area, Gemini released 43 meters at 0.6%, and Baseload 31 meters at 0.9. So some pretty exciting part of the basin to be in, historically fairly underexplored. I'll go into a little bit more detail about the projects. We'll start off with our North Millennium project and understanding why that is prospective and what our initial target is for that. So as mentioned on the overview, North Millennium sits about 7 kilometres directly north of Cameco's deposit. Now, Cameco's Millennium deposit is hosted where a north-south fault intersects a northeast trending basement conductor. So these are graphitic conductors mapped traditionally with geophysics, and shows up very nicely. The mineralization comes in on a north-south feature. We've looked at historic geophysics, and we can interpret a continuation of that north-south fault heading into our project area. When we reach our project area, we hit the next basement conductor. And from historic data, we can also see a similar response where we get a disruption of these basement conductors in the area. So we know that we've got a fault, we have an interpreted fault, which is carrying a pretty phenomenal uranium deposit just next door. And we know that we've got the right rock types, and we know that we've got a target in place. Basin will take a pretty gated approach to this. We definitely want to get drilling this, but we see the first step to maximize our exploration expenditure here is to refine that target using the traditional EM. So we'll hit the ground with some EM before drilling this in the Northern Hemisphere summer next year. Pretty exciting target to be involved in, one that we look forward to getting across the line shortly. I would note also recent exploration by our joint venture partner, Applebaskar, just off to the northeast, is shown on that map in front of you here. Now, the guy's got 9 meters at 2.4% in joint venture with Cameco, and to us, this only upgrades the prospectivity of this part of the world. The next project I will discuss with you is the Gaiku project. So Gaiku, as I mentioned, located in the fringes of the basin to the eastern side, pretty large tenement holding. Now, traditionally, this area has been relatively underexplored for uranium, with a focus traditionally, if you think about that cross-section as unconformity-related targets. This is more of a basement-hosted opportunity, so looking for things like next-gen's Arrow or the work being done by 92 and by Baseload. We do have some historic geochemistry, which has identified uranium at surface in the area, running at about 0.25%, and we believe that geologically we have the right rock types. And some historic geophysics shows that we have favourable structural orientations running through this area. So we've got a pretty aggressive exploration strategy for this. We've recently flown high-resolution magnetics and radiometrics. So that data will be available to us today, post-IPO. So we haven't paid for that yet, but once we get that, that will provide us some initial further targeting information. We'll be doing some ground geochemistry. and then we'll be aiming to get drilling on this pretty quick into the new year. So Q1 next year, this will be a winter drill program for us, and the first came off the rank from a drilling perspective for Basin. So look, this is to me, this eastern side of the basin from our explorability perspective is very high. We've got a nice gated strategy to move this project forward, and we've got some significant space and a recent spotlight on the area through recent success. Our Marshall project is contiguous with our North Millennium project, but we do separate it when we're discussing it, because technically it's a little bit of a different opportunity. Again, very close to some phenomenal uranium mineralization at Millennium, targeting traditional northeast trending basement hosted unconformity mineralization of the area. We do have a magnetic basin feature, which we're interpreting to be a significant presence of graphite. But at this stage, we do require some further ground geophysics before doing some first pass test work. So this will be the third come off the rank from a drilling perspective. So in summary, 3 projects, all located on the eastern margins of the Applebaskar Basin, all next door to some phenomenal mineralization. We're only 40 k's from McArthur River, 7 k's from Millennium. We have the right rock types, we have structures, and we have exploration pathways in place to go and explore those. Through our joint venture partner, we have permitting in place, so we're good to hit the ground going, with workflow starting immediately and drilling starting in the early next year. What does the team look like? So our board and management team is shown in front of you now. Blake Steele is our non-executive chairman. So Blake is a highly experienced minerals executive. His most recent work has been with the Zarga Uranium. So Zarga was built up under Blake's control and was sold to Encore Energy for $200 million at the start of this year. I've run through my background, but a technical uranium-focused exploration geologist from background. Jeremy Clark on the board. So Jeremy has over 18 years of exploration and mining experience, specifically in project identification, M&A opportunities, and with significant work on uranium opportunities globally. So Jeremy was involved in the early stages of assessing these projects and the assets behind them. Corey Bellick is on the board. So Corey is the Canalaska representative, our joint venture partner. Corey has a phenomenal experience in uranium, specifically in the Applebaskar as well. So Corey worked for Cameco prior to working for Canalaska, where he had involvement with the management of Fox Lake and West Fox Lake deposits. Peter Bird, non-executive director, brings to us a pretty round corporate background, solid history in investment banking, and Ben Donovan is our company secretary and also an NED for the group. So the project ownership, what does the deal structure look like in our earn-in through Canalaska? Our Marshall project is into 100% as of today, so we've issued shares for that. We have an expenditure agreement of $1.5 million on that, whereas our North Millennium and our Gaiku earnings are a more traditional joint venture agreement. So at IPO, we have 40% ownership of those 2 projects, and then its expenditure commitment of $2.5 million takes us through to 60%, and then $5 million takes us through to 80%. So, and up to 60%, Canalaska remains the operator, which is fantastic for us. It means we have an experienced team with recent exploration success located in the basin, ready to hit the ground running, with those relationships in place with local people, locals, with contractors. And to me, this is a sensible earning structure for a company of our size. We're not having to make large cash payments. All of our exploration expenditure is in the ground, so the way it should be. And finally, what it looks like. So we are going live today. We did a raise at 20 cents. So we issued 45 million shares, gives us a market cap of about 16 million and an enterprise value of 6.6. Our projected cash balance in the prospectus was sitting at about 9.6 mil. So that's pre-paying for any of the exploration which is happening at the moment. And we have a 80% in-ground exploration expenditure. And just to summarize that time flow or the timeline moving forward, as I mentioned, we have geophysics data which we'll be acquiring today. We have some ground geochemistry happening at Gaiku immediately. We'll be doing some further geophysics before Christmas, leading into drilling at Gaiku in Q1 next year, and potentially for some ground geophysics as well, before drilling in Q2 at North Millennium, and then potentially Q3 at the Marshall Project. So a pretty solid 18 months worth of news flow, initially through geophysics into drilling in early next year. We'll briefly touch on the uranium sector, then we might hand over back to you, Chloe, and we can potentially open up the question section and have a little bit of discussion and invite, obviously, I think we've got Corey on the line as well, and Jeremy, if you'd like to get involved, then please feel free. But for us, there's an underlying demand here for a push towards nuclear, and the founders of Basin identified this some 18 months ago. Hence the focus on establishing a North American-focused uranium exploration group. Europe at the moment, we've recently seen Germany is now committed to postponing the closure of the 2 existing reactors to provide emergency power there. There's 52 new reactors planned or proposed throughout the EU, with active construction taking place in France, the UK, Slovakia. And we're starting to see a change of policy coming from the leaders of some of these groups focused on providing energy which is capable of producing carbon neutrality. Japan, some great news coming out of Japan with the reactors now actively being restarted and the commitment to investing in further development. The US is actively encouraging nuclear power and stable green power supplies. And then the narrative still coming out of China is significant development of reactors as well with India. We are operating at a deficit, so currently production of uranium is about 150 million pounds, whereas the demand is sitting at about 200 million pounds a year. So the utilities are running off those stockpiles pretty quickly. And we do believe that puts us in a strong place for a steady increase in spot price. Obviously, the effect of spot acquiring has been significant, but hasn't been the sole reason for this run. And there's a little graph there on the right-hand side just showing, well, not all opportunities are the same. And when it comes to uranium opportunities, there's a few key aspects to consider. But the cost of production for Canada speaks for itself, with some of that, with over 50% of those sitting at less than $60 per pound. We compare that to some of the other global opportunities, which are far more costly to develop. And finally, we see an increase in technology being pushed on small modular reactors. So this is a big shift globally. We're seeing a very positive narrative coming out of the US and also in Europe now for developing these SMRs. And we see that as a fundamental shift as well for the power requirements moving forward, and real opportunities for changing the dynamic of energy supply for some remote locations in the world. So in summary, look, we have a pretty phenomenal land holding in the Eastern Applebaskar. We have a great team in place. We have a great board and a phenomenal joint venture partner. And we have some strong exploration pathways forward for all 3 projects. We look forward to releasing some of the value in these over the coming months and getting started. So thanks, Chloe. I'll pass over to questions if we have any.
Thanks for the comprehensive overview, Pete. Now let's move on to Q&A. So our first question today is, what makes uranium projects in the Applebaskar Basin unique from the rest of the world?
Yeah, it's a great question. Look, the Applebaskar is one of those places for which is, in my opinion, the absolute the place to be for uranium, and it comes from a series of reasons. One is the jurisdiction. So having that framework in place for operating mines, for these guys know how to operate. The key players are all actively exploring. So we have Orano, we have Cameco, we have Rio, all actively exploring within the basin. And as I point in the presentation, that continued exploration success, even in a downturn, to produce some pretty phenomenal deposits speaks for itself. So I guess to summarize that, it's jurisdiction, it's knowing how to operate in that area, and it's still having success as we've seen over the last 15 years. For 35 years, Chloe, as being a top 3 global uranium producer is a pretty phenomenal statement.
Right. How will you combat the seasonality of Basin Energy's exploration activity?
Oh, yeah, okay. So that's, as you'll appreciate, my background, a lot of that work's been in Northern Australia, where we've been working in the Alligator Rivers, which is also very seasonal, but for a very different reason. Um, for Basin, we do have the opportunity of operating both winter and summer drill programs. Our Gaiku project is better positioned for winter drilling. The reason being it's closer to infrastructure. We can get access, which is far smoother. So our Gaiku project will be focused on winter drilling. We can also do a reasonable amount of geophysics on the other projects through winter, and then come to summer, we'll use those long daylight hours for the North Millennium and Marshall projects. So it means you can effectively have 12 months worth of work. The two main drill programs, both winter and summer, but the shoulder seasons will be able to do some geophysics. So there is continued work planned for the next 18 months.
Great. Our next question is, where would you like to see the company 3 years from now?
Oh, well, we're explorers. Obviously, we're here to win the game here, and that's to make a big discovery. So we've got a really strong starting point here. We've got some great assets which we can go and explore. We can go and look. We can go and drill. And I'd like to think that we're kicking a resource out on one of those. As I sort of mentioned in the talk, and I apologize, I went around a little bit there, but we've got a bit of a gated program on all of these, and we will assess the merits of those as we go. We've got a work program planned for them, and we'll commit to those, and we'll do those. But obviously, we'll be looking at how else to build the company from uranium perspective.
Great. Now, this next question might be best answered by Corey. However, could you please talk more about the strategy of Canalaska electing to JV these projects with Basin rather than pursuing exploration itself?
Are you online there, Corey? Are you able to take this one?
I can take that one, Pete, if you're turning the
Thanks,
floor
Corey.
over to myself.
Please.
Hi, Pete and Chloe.
Yeah.
Yeah, so why did Canalaska choose to auction these off? Well, I mean, just before the upturn we saw last, let's say late 2021, we recognized what was coming. So we looked around and we sorted projects where we thought we had a lot of geological potential. Now, new projects undoubtedly, but that's part of what Canalaska does. Canalaska is an active explorer and project generator. So the projects we project generate, we try and find joint venture partners to help move those forward. We can't do it all. And as Pete articulated, we've had some recent success on a number of areas of our portfolio. And we can share these projects out, retaining upside for Canalaska shareholders, but also providing obvious upside to Basin Energy. So it's one of the tools we have in our toolbox to allow in joint venture partners and share not only the risk, but also the discovery based on that risk mitigation with the work that we do. So we're quite happy to have Basin Energy along with us on these 3 projects. They're quality assets, and we're really happy to have them moving forward. And yeah, that's the basics.
Great, thanks, Corey.
Thanks, Corey.
Our final question, maybe to you, Pete. Which projects are you most excited about?
Okay, that's the focus for me. Look, there's a phenomenal opportunity there at North Millennium. Having the evidence with that fault, which we know hosts Millennium deposit, passing into our tenement, and then intercepting the next favourable unit, so these graphitic conductors, is a place to be exploring. You add the weight of the work that Corey and his team have just done up to the northeast, and then you put it into a regional perspective, knowing that you've got McCarthy River, you've got Millennium, you've got now Canalaska's discovery, and that's an address that you want to be in. It's a great place to be. So look, I think that has a real opportunity to add some value, and I'm excited to put some drill holes into it, but I'm determined to do that strategically. We need to ensure that our drill holes are positioned to our absolute best of our ability. So we will be doing the geophysics on that first, and we will build that targeting criteria up. However, from the Gaiku project, I believe on the eastern end of the basin there, where we don't have the sandstone cover, for an explorability point of view, this is a great area which has been overlooked historically. We've got a lot of room here we have the right ingredients for further mineralisation. And it's try and imagine a project in Australia where you've got such mineralisation, for example, in the goldfields, but then having a big swathe of land which has effectively not been looked at with the right ingredients for further mineralisation. It's almost unheard of. So I guess that really opened my eyes when we started to look at these projects and these opportunities. So I guess an honest answer to answer the question directly, my favourite is the Gaiku Project. I'm looking forward to getting stuck in, but I am also very curious as to moving North Millennium forward.
Great. Well, that appears to cover the majority of questions from our audience today. We wish to thank Pete Morehouse for today's overview, and we will make a recording of today's webinar available on Basin Energy's website over the coming days. And if you have any further questions, feel free to reach out via the contact details at the bottom of our ASX releases. Thank you everyone for joining us today.
Thanks, Chloe.